underscore Grant. Tyler Grant, welcome. Thanks for being here today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
We've been hearing a lot about the rhetoric. The president has been shooting at China. Supposedly, he had a great relationship with President Xi. I'm not sure if that's been changing. Why, though, a threat, we understand with the tariffs and so on, why a threat to the elections? Why? What's your take on that?
Yeah, so President Xi Jinping is one of the most sophisticated presidents that we've seen, especially out of China, in a long time. And he is orchestrated through the Chinese Communist Party, which is the propaganda arm of China, that to interfere in several different elections, several different ways in which the Chinese want to exert their soft power globally. And what we saw is sort of a shot across the bow with what President Trump sided with the Des Moines Register, where they posted an op-ed in their kind of the paid propaganda section of many of the United States newspapers about trying to influence Des Moines voters about the negative effects of Trump tariffs. And so we're seeing that this is,
How are these op-eds presented? In other words, are they signed by somebody in particular who is representing China? Are they signed by somebody who is being paid by China? Give us some more details on that.
Sure. So in a lot of U.S. newspapers, you can foreign countries and foreign corporations, et cetera, can purchase paid advertisements, and a lot of times it'll just say paid advertisement, but it's presented as if it's like an op-ed, as if it's part of the newspaper. So like the Washington Post does this, several other newspapers do this, and sure, like it does say paid advertisement and everything else, but it looks and appears as if it's news, or if it's an op-ed, as if it's just a regular part of the paper. And so what the Des Moines Register part was it looked as if it was an op-ed saying that Trump's tariffs were going to harm Iowan voters and Iowan consumers.
So one of the things you say here that in this particular piece is that, critics are right when they say that as of now, there is no evidence to suggest the Chinese are doing what the Russians did in 2016. But you say that analysis falls a little short. How so?
Well, from what we know, at least, I don't believe in, and I don't think that anyone says that the Russians attacked our actual voting infrastructure or were able to change votes. And that's a lot of people were pushing kind of this idea, or at least floating this idea, that maybe the Russians were tampering with votes, which obviously would be wildly undermining U.S. elections. But this sort of propaganda shifting about moving and changing American minds through fake news is something that the Chinese are doing very exceedingly well globally, and we don't really know yet if they're able or what they've done, because Vice President Mike Pence floated the idea that they're using covert actors, front groups, propaganda outlets. I mean, these guys get national security briefings, so we don't know exactly the extent to which they're doing this. I mean, the Des Moines Register paid advertisement stuff is certainly just sort of a shot across the bow at President Trump going to a very red state and using paid advertisements to try to change voters' minds about the tariffs. There is certainly something else going on. I mean, if we go off of what we saw in Taiwan, where just last month there was a massive hurricane in Japan, and the Chinese Communist Party floated the idea that or used a bunch of different fake bots and fake news disseminators off a Taiwanese message board to suggest that the Taiwanese Economic and Cultural Office, which is the de facto embassy in Japan, didn't do anything for all of these international Taiwanese travelers that were stuck at the airport. Meanwhile, the Chinese had sent these buses to pick them up and move them away from the airport into safety, and disseminated that the Taiwanese weren't doing anything for their own people and the Chinese were doing everything for the Taiwanese people, which ended up